Has Doctor Who maintained the trajectory it had this year with episode 5? Let's find out. The Story and the Engine, written by Inua Ellams, I really hope I've pronounced that right and I'm very sorry if I haven't, is the 5th episode of season 2, and it takes the Doctor and Belinda to Nigeria, where the Doctor comes across a barbershop he always used to frequent, but things are not all as they seem, and there is an evil, in quotation marks, barber collecting stories from his customers/victims. This review is going to be a little bit shorter than my normal ones because frankly I just do not have a lot of time at the moment, but I have to say, basically, this episode was great and I loved it, and I think this series really is just on track to be an absolute all-timer. I thought the idea of the Doctor, the first Black Doctor at least, he thinks he is, finding a barbershop in Nigeria to call home, to feel safe and comfortable, was such a cool idea, and I really loved that when he was explaining that to Belinda, she understood straight away. I really loved that they kind of shared an experience, even though they have a different life. They have a different experience, but it's kind of shared. I really like that, and I loved some of the character moments between the Doctor and the guys in the barbershop. And I think Ncuti Gatwa's performance, especially in the barbershop when he was feeling betrayed by the original barber, was absolutely incredible. I loved so much of what was going on in this episode. It's a very interesting story about forgiveness and about hurting people, as was said by Belinda. And having just seen Thunderbolts in the cinema the same day, no spoilers for Marvel's Thunderbolts, I find it very interesting how these two stories actually kind of run in parallel. A lot of Thunderbolts is about forgiving yourself for past events, for dealing with trauma, for forgiving yourself for hurting people. And I find that to be a really fun narrative. So to come away from Thunderbolts and then see this episode of Doctor Who the same day was, I don't know, it was a lot on my mind that day, I suppose. I know, it was good though. I really enjoyed the ending with the barber kind of not dying, not being locked up or anything. He was just forgiven. And, you know, in a way that was almost more painful for him because he truly didn't believe that he should have been forgiven until everyone showed him that kindness. And I really like that this series is taking a slightly kinder approach to villains this time. I mean, obviously, you know, Incel Man turned into sperm and then hoovered up, and, you know, Midnight Entity, well, I mean, you know, it escaped. But you think about Lux, you know, he got what he wanted. He kind of died, but it wasn't an explosive murder death. Conrad, you know, he survived. He should have died, quite frankly, but hey-ho, villain of the finale, I'm calling it now. And the barber here, you know, everyone survived, everyone was happy. There were no fatalities in this episode, as far as I could tell. And I really liked that. I thought this was a really mature story and a really important story. And I loved the stories themselves being told by the barbers, especially the one about the women braiding maps into their hair. I thought that not only was that such a brilliant plot device for the Doctor and Belinda to escape, but I thought that was just such a cool inclusion into the episode anyway. And I think one of the biggest, most amazing things about Doctor Who is that you can get so many different voices and so many different backgrounds and ethnicities and experiences feeding directly into the same show all at once. And it's episodes like this I always particularly resonate with, even if the specific experience that's being expressed couldn't be further from my own life experience. I always love these episodes so much more. And with that, I've got to say, it was wonderfully shot. Incredible performances, really, from everyone. That story the Doctor told about Belinda just being a nurse, wonderful, and really just continuing to cement in my head that Belinda is one of the best companions since the revival began. I don't mean revival as in, like, it's just been Ruby and Belinda. I mean from 2005. And I loved the history that the Doctor had with Abby and with all the other gods. I found it really fascinating that all these other gods now, we have to assume, do exist. You know, the Doctor's met them all, the Doctor's encountered them all, the Doctor's betted with them. And I find that really cool that that's all come true now. And I think, well, we run the risk of it maybe getting a bit silly down the line, especially if they're going the route I think they're going, where we're basically going to have to assume that the Doctor is himself a god. We'll see if that happens. I mean, one could argue he's already the chosen one because of the Shobogan shit, but whatever. We won't talk about that. Actually, no, we definitely will talk about that, because funnily enough, in this episode, there was a cameo from Jo Martin's Fugitive Doctor. I could read into this way too much, but at the end of the day, she had a new costume, she cameoed in a new series, and she even made reference to a story that's not finished. If you think for 1 second we're not seeing her again, at least next series, if not in the finale of this series, you're barking up the wrong tree. That was definitely teasing something more. But I just thought that was a really nice moment, that when the Doctor was referring to history or a previous meeting with another character, it cut to the Doctor they were at the time. I thought that was really nice. Of course, the Doctor did say he was the only Black Doctor, the first Black Doctor. You know, and then later in the episode, we see that he clearly remembers being black previously. However, I do think that he doesn't really fully remember it, and those memories kind of like bled through. Look, we'll take it, whatever. A couple of other things to note before I kind of say some final thoughts, because yes, like I say, I'm incredibly busy this week and I would rather make a review than not, but I'm afraid I just can't put as much time into it as I have done some of the others. I think Lux was like a 25-minute review. I can't do that this week. Mrs. Flood's cameo was stupid. I was getting excited that she was starting to do bad things, and I thought maybe we now might start to see tidbits of her plan or something each week. With the Interstellar Song Contest being the only episode then before the finale, and knowing Russell T Davies probably leading into said finale, there's not really a lot of time, so I feel like this was a wasted cameo of hers. However, I appreciate that it was separate from the narrative. I like that it was just in the flashback story about Belinda. I liked that. I thought that was nice. I thought it was a good idea. I just wish we'd seen her doing something more devious than taking pills. I'm getting fed up of being reminded that Ncuti Gatwa isn't the only Doctor. That cameo from Joe Martin was fantastic. However, constantly doing that thing where they just like show clips of old Doctors, it was fine in, you know, an anniversary, but in Rogue, was it needed? I don't think it was, especially, you know, David Tennant's face. And in this one, I don't think it was needed that we saw just loads of greatest of clips of the previous Doctors. I get why narratively it worked, you know, I'm born, I die, I'm born, but that could have been done in such a better way. Anyway, yeah, I hope they don't do that again. That annoys me. I also really hope the Doctor isn't a god, but I'm afraid that the Doctor is a god. Oh yeah, and that kid at the end, that, you know, Belinda saw pointing. That was Captain Poppy from Space Babies, apparently, if we're going on the fact that it was the same actor and also called Poppy in the credits. This is not a spoiler from a leak or anything. Genuinely, that was just in the credits. Look, I'm going to try and make another video at some point this week explaining my theory, but to put it lightly, this episode absolutely confirmed to me that the Doctor is somewhat in the land of fiction. Like, whether it's a TV show or not, or if they're going to lean into the whole just story narrative of it, you cannot convince me at this point that Wish World isn't something to do with wishing things into existence like a fictional story, and that they've always been in the Wish World or something like that. I don't know. There's other stuff happening with Doctor Who this week that's probably going to overshadow anything to do with this episode, and I might have to make a quick video on it when it happens. I have no idea what to title it, because I don't know if it's going to count as a leak or not, or if it's just actual public announcements, but we'll see. Anyway, I think I'm going to have to call it there. So the story in the engine, I'm giving a lovely 8 out of 10. There was a lot to love. I think the pacing was a little bit off, and there was just not enough Belinda, although I can kind of understand why. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved so much of what it had to say, especially the barber being frustrated that he never got credit for his work. And I think in a show like Doctor Who, which is always ever so slightly more anti-establishment than, you know, than other companies that would strip credit away from writers, I thought that was a really important story to tell and a really important motive of the villain, and I loved it. I thought it was great. 8 out of 10. This series is an absolute banger, and I cannot wait for more. Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and tune in next week for my review of the Interstellar Song Contest. I might have a longer review, I might not. It all depends if Rylan is exactly as annoying as he looks in the trailer, and I just can't bring myself to do it. Anyway, I think that's it. Until then, stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I'll see you in the next one.